Hi there, it's Tad Hargrave from Marketing for Hippies, and welcome to this call today on the topic of weeks at work. We have Gemma Gilbert and Greg Faxon here. And this was something that I heard Gemma talk about while I was in the UK, and we got to meet in person, which was wonderful. And just even the name of it struck me because I've seen it over and over again that entrepreneurs uh, never really prioritize lifestyle or and hippies never prioritize structure. And it's a terrible combination because people, we often work for the man, we don't like that, and then we leave and we become the man. We're a worse tyrant as a boss than our own boss was. And this question of how do we structure our time as entrepreneurs feels like a fairly central question, fairly important for us if we're going to both have a fulfilling business, but also one that works on the financial level. If we want to have a business model that is not just safe for people to check us out from a distance, but also simple, sustainable for us, and satisfying. So maybe we'll just dive right in. Thanks for joining you too. Uh, I'm curious, how do you see a connection between the way we are, I guess, conditioned in school or in our employment situations we've gone through and the way that we end up working as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, thanks for having us. I can take this one. I'm curious for your thoughts too, Gemma. So I would say we are conditioned to do the most in school and as employees. By do the most, I mean basically we get rewarded for hard work and following the assignment. I remember there was a science fair in middle school, and I feel like I had the coolest project. It was about like, what's the best way to clean up oil spills? And I was like, all right, some people use like haystacks. So I got little cereal, like tried to absorb the oil. I like somehow got a Bunsen burner. Like they lent me like a flame torch. I don't know. Well, I was like, you could sometimes with oil, you can like burn it, or I like put bleach or I put chemicals in it to get rid of the oil. I thought it was the coolest concept. And then I got like a B minus, and there was this other kid in our grade, Jason Maxwell, who had a project called Rice is Nice. And he just talked to rice to encourage it to grow half the rice. And then the other half the rice, he didn't talk to it. And actually, now I'm in a place in my consciousness where that actually is kind of a cooler concept. But like, it wasn't a great project, but he got a better grade than me because he did each of the little assignments. You had to have a heading that was like
Mm,
14-point font. And I didn't do any of that. I just like did it how I thought would be cool. And that's how we're conditioned. Now, as entrepreneurs, following the assignment, it doesn't really map on. Working harder, it doesn't really map on. So, what I'm advocating for is doing the least. So, the mindset of doing the least is what are the fewest activities and the least amount of time I can do in my business that gets the result that my business needs, that brings in the clients or that services the client in the right way. There's no points for going above and beyond for working 8 hours if 4 hours would be good enough.
100%. And I feel like I learned this by doing the least at school because everyone was like, because I'm so last minute, I would just like stay up all night, turn in an assignment, get an A grade, and everyone would be like, well, that's unfair. I've worked really, really hard. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not rewarded for the hard work. You're rewarded for the output. And so if we can get better at creating the output we want with the minimal effort. And I think like conditioning as well comes into this for women and like trying to be everything for everyone. And often I see with a lot of my clients, like they put themselves last. So they literally stretch themselves thin, delivering in their business to their clients, to their kids. And then what they end up is burnt out because they can't sustain it.
yeah,
I'll even add one more, which is Tad, you kind of spoke to this idea of the best part of being an entrepreneur is you're your own boss, but it's also the worst part because you don't have that structure. Sometimes it's nice to have an assignment to follow. Like sometimes we might daydream as entrepreneurs a little bit like, could I just have a job where I just like work behind the desk, just greeting people, and I could just kind of like turn my brain off for 8 hours and just do it. And we don't have that assignment. And so it's on us to set goals each month or quarter, or to have things that we're tracking, to figure out what does a perfect average week look like? When would I take calls? When would I do focused work? When would I say, I'm actually done with work? I'm not working after 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. or whatever it is for you. So creating that structure and those boundaries isn't really something that we're taught, but we need to know as entrepreneurs.
Right, and maybe the question I should have started with, is this question of where did it come from? Because both of you are business coaches. Greg, I know you focused a lot on the how to have those conversations with potential clients. Gemma, I know in the last while you really focused on helping people create very simple business models. But I'm curious, what's the story of where did this come from? We have a sense of where our conditioning comes from as entrepreneurs that maybe gets in our way. But where did this idea come from of Weeks That Work? It's a great name. What's the genesis of this idea? How did you end up working together on it? Yeah, I'd love to know.
Gemma, do you want to take this, or should I?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So Greg and I have collaborated like quite a few times over the years, like chatting to each other's audiences. And I've worked with Greg for a long time. He was my first ever business coach. And, a lot of the discipline I've learned was from seeing someone in a very different life position to me. I had like a young kid at the time, and it was really full on, kind of learning how to have business non-negotiables and like show up. And Greg was a big inspiration for that. And it was in a conversation where Greg was like, hey, can I come chat to your audience about this thing that I'm getting like super passionate about talking about? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because I'm getting super passionate about talking about that too, because it's like the softer side of business that people don't focus on. They want the strategy and the tactics. And so we hopped on a Zoom and we realized that it'd be super fun to collaborate and like create the thing that supports the tactics and the strategy behind it.
I was really worried when we first were batting the idea around that no one would really want what we were creating. We did an early bird launch. So the program, the enrollment officially closes on Friday, and then we start in January. And I was worried before we launched it. I was like, no one's really going to want this, because you and I both know that really what we're teaching is discipline. Like, if you don't have discipline, you can't run a business. It's not going to work. It's not enough to learn marketing and to learn sales. You do need to do it. Like, you can't just be in the membership. You can't just take the course, just hire the coach and check the box. And I think we've all seen that. People who put their credit card down and they say, okay, the problem is now solved. I invested in the marketing coach or the program, so now my marketing is done. Not the case. And you also can't just do it once. Marketing is about showing up in front of the same people again and again, honestly, for years, right? It's like 8 years later, the person's like, this person's still doing this thing. I think, they're trustworthy now. I'm going to hire them. And so, obviously, when we talk about the program, we're talking about the parts that people really recognize as a problem. I don't have the work-life balance that I want. I don't know, when I look at my to-do list, what's most important with my marketing and what to do first versus what's just a waste of time. But the core skill that I really want people to leave Weeks That Work with is a discipline that they can take into and apply with any marketing strategy that they learn, however their business shifts and changes, so that they know they're reliable to keep getting done what matters. And I think that's what I'm most excited about supporting people with. Because if you have that, you always can rely on yourself to make money, and you won't need a boss if you can build that skill.
Mm. So, Weeks That Work implies there's such a thing as weeks that don't work. And what does that look like? What does a week that doesn't work look like for an entrepreneur? What's the typical thing that you see?
So for me, it's like you get to Friday, you look at this like never-ending to-do list, and you can't really see that you moved anything forward. You were busy, but you don't really feel like you've made progress. You had like a 4-hour window when you can't really remember what you were doing, like you procrastinated on that. But then you're not actually having quality time with your family or like, whoever's in your life, because you're beating yourself up for not getting the work done in the allocated time. So you have this like work creep into your personal life. So you're always on. you're always stressed, you're always anxious about the stuff that you didn't do. And so Friday comes, and then you know you're going to do it the following week, and you beat yourself up for not being good enough at getting it done.
This is sort of an emotional thing for me because over the last, it'll be 10 years in business coming up. Every single year, I've had like 3 on average times of about a month or 2 each. This is like half the year now that I'm thinking about it, where I have just felt like I'm off. I'm not on my game. And then I start to feel depressed and I'm like, wait, I should be productive. But then I'm like, it makes me question my whole business. So instead of just like solving the problem, I'm like, no, it must be that I'm not passionate about my business or else I'd be more excited to work. And so then I have times where I'm like almost manic, like getting a ton done. And I'm very excited about my business and money's coming in. It's great. So these ebbs and flows in your business, you need to learn to navigate. And I kept a little log for myself in Evernote. It's called it How to Get Out of a Slump. And I tried to record each time I was in one of these slumps, like what changed that like got me out of it. And I figured out one thing, and it's gonna just sound so silly because it's so obvious. What got me out of a slump was feeling productive. If I felt productive, I felt good about myself, didn't beat myself up, and that momentum carried me into feeling excited about my business again. It was not like I changed my business. No, the same business sometimes was motivating, sometimes not. It came down to whether I ended the day or the week saying like, I'm a good person who's productive and can act like an adult and get stuff done. And so you need systems to ensure that you stay productive. So I would say a week that works is one that you've identified the most important things that you need to focus on. You're clear. There's a degree of clarity of what needs to get done. Number 2, you're executing that. You can actually see yourself doing it and you're getting some results back, whether that's actually money in the bank or some other thing that you can tangibly see. And number 3 is you have some sense of balance in your week. You could do 1 or 2, but you're working 9-hour days. You're getting a ton of results. You're clear, but you're not going to keep doing that necessarily. This like 9-hour days sort of betrays like how little I work. But to me, 9-hour days, Monday through Friday of focused work would not be sustainable. I can't keep doing that year after year. I know Gemma is similar. Like I shoot for a 25-hour week, 25 hours of focused work. So about 5 hours a day or 6 hours a day if you're taking a day off midweek. So that's what works for me. I found more than that. It's hard to keep going. So that to me is a week that works. And when I can stack those, I feel good about myself and the business gets results. And I don't get into those sort of depressive, weird mindset phases as much.
Yeah. And like for me, structure is so important because like with women being cyclical, there are periods of the month where you just don't want to show up. So unless you have that structure, you will literally kind of not show up. And I've had like so many of my audience say to me, how are you so disciplined? And for me, that's hilarious because in my books, I am like the least disciplined person. But actually, I've done the same thing every week for 5 years. But I do it in a scrappy, less organized way than say Greg does. But the stuff gets done. The second I started seeing stuff as non-negotiable. If you don't have the structures and the systems, anytime you don't feel like it, there's such a strong self-care bandwagon now. And one of my, honestly, my most responded to emails was 1 year ago. And it was like, are you using self-care as an excuse? Because people would say like, oh, you know, I'm not feeling, I need to take a self-care day. And it's like, yeah, but you also need to show up and make some money. So like, you've got to balance like what makes you feel good and like looking after your mental health and like not just working when you get to a day and you don't feel like it and everyone going, well, yeah, but you listen to your body.
I want to piggyback off that because that's so good. It gets me fired up. I think alongside the self-care can sometimes be used as an excuse. I also think like follow your intuition. That line of thinking can be used as an excuse because it's like, in my heart, when I check in with myself, I don't feel like writing a blog post today. So it must not be aligned. So I should go for a walk or I should take the day off. Sometimes that's absolutely right. But it's a little bit easy for us to fool ourselves too, because a lot of times I don't feel like sitting down to write. A lot of times I don't feel like doing a thing. Once I'm into it, I usually feel better afterwards. It's sort of like you're not going to every day feel like you want to work out, right? But that's part of being a human, and you know you're going to feel better afterwards. So if you're only working when you want to work or you feel motivated or inspired, that's what we call a hobby. A hobby is something you only do when you feel like it. A business is more like a job, right? So the definition of work, sometimes you feel like it, sometimes you don't do it, you feel like it, but you do it anyway. And that's much easier when you have structures that just ensure the thing gets done without using a lot of willpower. So I use this phrase, lazy self-discipline, right? Similar to Gemma, a lot of people think I'm disciplined, but actually I just design my life by asking the question, how would the laziest person on earth accomplish this goal? And then I set it up that way, right? So do I have to have some community that makes it more likely I'm just going to do the thing because I'm just going to be in that hive mind and just follow what other people do? Do I need to have like the classic example, like the workout clothes laid out in the morning so I don't have to think about it? I just get in them and then I work out. Making it easy on yourself to do the important things, to do the required actions, even when you don't have that willpower or that motivation.
Hey, beautiful. So let me push back, because a lot of entrepreneurs would say, well, easy for you to, but the reason I'm so busy and I'm working so many hours is because there's just so many demands. There's so many emails, there's so much to do. I can't even keep up with it all. So this isn't that I'm not managing my time well. I'm managing my time extremely well. I just have way too many things to do, and this whole entrepreneurship thing is a racket. I was lied to. It's not about structure; it's about just sheer volume of work. So, you're wrong. How would you respond to this?
I can start. So that's a little bit like saying I don't have time to work out. I'm too busy to work out. We all know that that's a question of priorities. And in fact, I think the busier someone feels, the longer the to-do list, the less likely they're prioritizing. Like I think the most effective business owners I know have like 3 or 4 things a day, and they kind of have 4 or 5 focuses a week. And they're like, everything else just kind of needs to either take care of itself or I'm not going to deal with it because it doesn't actually make me money or serve clients better. So that's where I would start, is just like busy might be a sign that you're not prioritizing.
Yeah. And for me, like, we've got model and we've got marketing, right, for this. So one, have you chosen a business model that is actually realistic to serve the number of clients you want to serve and make the amount of money you don't? And if not, you might have to adjust that model. And secondly, marketing, is there stuff you're doing that's not really working, but you're doing it anyway? So like most people are on the social media, like Train, and so many of my clients like, oh, I don't really get clients from there, but I keep posting there anyway. And so, in fact, Greg, you said this to me in a coaching session once where I was like, I've got too much to do. And you were like, well, you've only got 2 options. You've either got to take some stuff off the to-do list, or you got to get better at prioritizing it and like doing it. Like there's no other option. So when people say they got too much to do, I feel like you've got to go back to basics and think, what are the priorities? What's the model? What's the marketing? What does doing the least look like? And stop making excuses.
Yeah, you might have an unrealistic expectation of what can actually get done. I'm glad you mentioned the pricing and packaging. We're actually including in the program like a bonus module on pricing and packaging, and it's similar, Tad, to what the presentation I did on like how to build a higher end package, because it's really hard to have a week that works if you're charging $40, per hour for the thing you're doing. You're just not going to hit your income goals in the number of hours that are in the week very easily. And so part of this is around having boundaries, and part of it is around learning how to market and sell a higher end package where you don't have to work with 1 million clients and just feel run down. It's actually sustainable.
Yeah. Well, this may be a good moment to. I would love to hear a bit about the program that you're doing. You're saying it's coming up soon. Hopefully, you'll offer it more times in the future, because I do think this is a great topic. But if you wanted to do a little rundown of that, and then I've got a number of more questions and points I'd love to get into. So if we can pause for the commercial message maybe at this point, and then we'll keep going.
Yeah. Gemma, do you want to share with them a little bit about like the logistics and the overview, and then I can talk about more of the curriculum side?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So this is an exciting group because we're running a case study group. This is the first time we run it, which basically means you're getting it for a really great price. And we're going to work together for 12 weeks. And we're doing a mixture of like, go do the learning, then come show up to a coaching session with us the following week to kind of implement and go deeper with it. So like week 1 structured, for example, like how can we figure out what you're doing the least marketing strategy is. Then the following week, you're going to jump on a coaching call. Greg's going to run one that's suitable for like the US time zone. I'm going to run one that's suitable for the UK time zone. And we're just going to cycle through that for 12 weeks. And we're going to have you implement each step with us. So you end up with this master plan for your business, which is the systems, the structure. Like, what does your personalized week that work look like?
I'm really excited about the master plan piece because this is an idea that Gemma, I think you brought in, is like basically each module, each thing they learn in the course is going to make its way into a little Google Doc or Google Sheet where they can literally say, here's how I do that. So for example, one of our modules is about structuring your week, which we've talked a little bit about today. So you're going to actually have your weekly map. Like, here's my perfect average week. That's what, when I do my Calendly availability, like that's what I'll use for calls. When I know when am I doing focus work, that's when I'm doing it. You'll literally have that blocked out for your marketing, and knowing the 1 to 2 areas you really want to focus on and be consistent on, you'll have that plan there. So, and I also want to add one thing, which is we've already gotten over 64 people signed up for the beta round. So this is not, I want to be really clear, this is not your 3 to 5 person, very intimate group coaching program, right? I don't want to get us into trouble where we feel bad later. So those calls are going to be like Q&A calls, right? If you have questions, we'll absolutely get through as many as we can. We're not going to be coaching each person for 30 minutes on a call. The modules will be very clear, and then you'll have our help to implement on the calls. So in terms of the curriculum, it kind of breaks down into 3 buckets. And these are correlated with like what a week that work means. So the first is identify. How do you identify what you need to focus on? So you're really clear on that each week. So that breaks down into, we're going to help with goal setting, and we're going to help with strategy. What is your main marketing strategy? One of the things we've both found is that people try to do too much. Like they're like, all right, I should have a webinar. And then I learned that, Facebook ads are important. And then I learned that TikTok's good. So now we're doing like 10 mediocre things in terms of marketing. None of them really work, and you can't stick with them very long. Or you find yourself like, I'll use a term like program hopping, which people talk about in strength training. Like you do one strength training program for 4 weeks, and then you kind of get bored or it's not working, so you do another one. You don't really get stronger because you keep switching. So in strategy, which is module 1 or 2, we're going to help people identify what's their main revenue generating activity. If they only had 60 to 90 minutes every morning, what would they do that would drive new leads and customers into their business? And it really needs to be like 1 or 2 things. We make the distinction in the program between farming and hunting. So some strategies are like hunting. It's like, just reach out to your existing network and invite them into a consult, or just reach back out to past clients, book a check-in call, see if they want to keep working with you, or some sort of direct reach out, right? That's quick, but you can't really do reach outs your whole life. 10 years later, it'll be just as hard to get clients. And then there's farming. How do you grow an audience? How do you plant seeds, relationships, content marketing that actually build sort of a farm for you, where when you need clients, when you need customers, you just say, hey, this is my new offer. So that's the first bucket, is identify. Then we talk about how to execute things in your business consistently. So your structure, your mindset. And then the third bucket is optimizing. So how do you keep doing these things again, week after week, and make them more efficient? We're talking about building systems in your business, and also what type of support do you have? Do you want to bring on a VA, even if it's just 5 hours a month, to take off some of that admin? That will free up more time for you.
Amazing. And how much is it?
$497.
Okay, beautiful. That's great. Let me just riff for a second on this, because one of the things I'm really hearing from both of you is there's a need for a lot of entrepreneurs to just get priorities straight, not meaning they have to be a particular way, but it's really good to be clear as an entrepreneur. Yeah, is this a business or is it a hobby? When I talked about business model in my day-long workshop when I was on tour, I would say to the audience, look, I'm gonna ask a question and I don't actually give a shit what your answer is. But you need to know for yourself. Is this a business or is it a hobby? You don't have to monetize every square inch of your life. You can have hobbies. Not everything has to make you money. But this thing you're doing, which is it? Because if it's a hobby, as you're saying, just do it when you want to do it. I mean, there's no pressure. You can give it away as a gift to friends. You could charge money if you want to, when you want to, however much you want. But if it's really a career, if it's a business, suddenly different things come into play. So there's number one is just, I think there's a fundamental decision around priorities there. Is this a priority for me, or is this something I do when I can? And then within a business, figuring out which things actually matter and which things don't. One of the things I've said, it just came out of me one day. I said, people often go to social media to hide. You would think, oh, people go to social media to be visible, and we're so scared of being visible, and I need to hire a coach to help me with my visibility issues. And that's all true. But what's also true is that it's much easier to post a reel on social media than it is to reach out to somebody, whether that be a potential client or a hub. So it's easy to be visible to the masses. And what's often much easier to do that than it is to be visible to a specific person, to do something very tangible that might have direct feedback and consequence to us in the So people often pick these approaches to grow their business. I see that are just, it's like, why are you spending all your time on that? Yeah, you spent all this time designing really nice looking Instagram posts, and they look great. But are they going to get you clients right away? Are they going to functionally build your business? So anyways, I love it. And the other thing that it strikes me is so much of business success comes down to rhythm. It comes down to having because there's some rhythms that are just not sustainable over time. You can't keep it up, or it's too slow. And you're never going to get any real momentum, and figuring out the rhythm of what, both of those feel very important.
Yeah. Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
By the way, these are like two of my favorite people, so this is nice. When I used to wrestle, I spent so much time like creatively avoiding the thing that actually makes you a better wrestler. I would do I got really into strength training, do like foam rolling, go for runs before school. That's all fine. But the thing that makes you a better wrestler is wrestling with people better than you. That's basically it. Like 1 hour of wrestling with people better than you is worth 100 hours of like strength training, mobility, little stuff to assist with your wrestling. And the reason why people don't do what's required for their business is because the things that get you results the fastest and most predictably are the hardest, scariest things, right? Like when I wrestle with someone better than me, I might, just look dumb. I might lose that match. Like I can't really get rejected, if I'm designing the Instagram caption, but I can if I reach out to a referral partner, like you said. And so I think part of this kind of execution bucket and mindset is having the courage to do the things that will get you out of your office sooner because they just get results faster.
Yeah. There's the old Scottish Gaelic proverb. It says a hula rutach and rut bechor, and it means everything but the needed thing. And I see this so often in business. People, they're doing everything but the needed thing. It's like, great, you've reflected on your niche a bunch. You've done a lot of soul searching and reflecting, but you haven't talked to anybody. You haven't actually done an intro workshop to anybody. You haven't, whatever the most important things are in whatever industry. And one of the things that I remember, I was talking to somebody who worked for me, and she very much had this like, well, I just didn't feel like working today vibe. This happened a number of times where things didn't get done. She's like, yeah, I just really needed a me day. And I said to her, I said, look, I know you have a dream of living in the country one day, which was true. You should love being in nature. And I said, if you live in the country, and let's say you have animals, you've got cows, well, you need to milk those cows every day. And you didn't feel like it today. Well, that's going to hurt the cows. You're going to injure those cows. You're putting them at risk because you didn't milk them. You've got to check on the chickens every day. You got to feed them every day, or they're going to go hungry and they're going to suffer. And I did have to let her go in the end. I just said, so you're hurting the cows now. It's got to stop. And this happens just so often in business. Okay, but to get practical on this, I'm curious what your weeks look like. What's the structure of your weeks? How do you build it? I mean, Greg, you're saying you aim it for 25 hours a week. So I'd love to hear from both of you. How do you structure your time?
Yeah, so I do 25 hours too. And my main kind of structure is theme days. So I have 2 days that are intense calls, like Tuesdays and Thursdays are my call days. Monday, Wednesday, Friday are back office days. And I have them themed around like this one's marketing. It's like a wholly focus on marketing. And the other ones are moving the big projects forward, like the goals that I've set for the year that require like more legwork. And then all of my client calls slot onto Tuesday and Thursday. And I try and stick with that like as much as I can. And I have like an overflow on a Wednesday afternoon, like if I need like a few more call slots. And for me, I like having a hard finish that makes me stop. Like if I had like more leeway, so like Monday, I go to a PT session. I have to walk out the door at 2:30 or I miss my PT. The other days I have to pick up my son from school, and it really helps me to finish and walk out straight out the door. If I have like some leeway, I'll find myself working longer. So structure is super important to me.
Yeah. Have you ever found it where when your partner's there, you go to bed at like 8 or 9 p.m.? When your partner leaves, you're like, it's 1 a.m. and I'm like watching YouTube on my phone and watching a show and eating a snack. Like, who am I? You know what I mean? Well, you had a structure that the partnership reinforced. It's not even that they necessarily have better habits than you. It's just like, oh, okay, time to go to bed because you're here. And now we're in a different rhythm when they're not there. So I love, Gemma, that you have almost this social accountability to reinforce your stop times. I do things a little bit differently. And that's one of the reasons I'm excited about collaborating on it, because I think it's helpful to have different models when you're seeing, how does this person think about their marketing? How does this person think about the structure of their week? So for me, I like my days to be pretty similar. I've tried theme days or batching, calls one day, focus work one day. I've actually found that it's better for me if I do just focus work in the morning, and then around 11, I can go into call mode. My energy dips around like between 1 and 3. So that's just like admin, take a walk, eat lunch. There's no real point trying to get work done because I don't have good energy. And then like 3 to 5 is a call chunk. So for me, balancing focused work in the morning when I have that type of energy, calls later in the day with an admin chunk in the middle tends to work well.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I guess it's I mean, there's not an infinite number of models here, but it's good for people to be clear. Yeah, what's going to work for them for their lifestyle? Do they have kids? Do they, various health conditions? Sometimes people are going to need to structure their time in a certain way that's going to work for them. Yeah, I love that. I think
I
that's.
want to add one thing, which is having a conversation. We're fostering a teenager, 17-year-old boy, and he asked me the other day, he was like, how many hours did you work? He asked me something like that. I was like, oh, probably like 25 focused hours. And he was like, what? He couldn't understand because he's getting his ass up at like 6:30 a.m. to work at a bakery. He works, 40-hour week, just a normal full-time job. And yeah, I ended up telling him, I was sort of on the spot. So I was just like, oh, you can only get, for thinking work, you can probably only get like 5 good hours a day of thinking work. Because I don't know, I felt guilty for some reason telling him I wasn't working that many hours. But then I was thinking about it and I was reflecting on like, what would I have told him if I had more time to think about it? And the real honest answer is like, you don't get paid for the amount of time you show up to things. Definitely in a business, for sure in a business. But even in a job, right? I mean, there's a reason why people can work the same 40-hour week time-wise and someone's getting paid for more. Now, we can argue about what society values, and there's some jobs that they're working their ass off and they are providing value, but society doesn't recognize that value correctly, and that's absolutely true. The goal, though, whether you're an employee or entrepreneur, is to figure out how am I spending those hours? Am I spending the hours in a way, if my goal is to make money, that society recognizes as valuable? because if I can do that in my hours, I can work less. And as a business owner, you have the flexibility to do it however you want. I saw a reel or a TikTok from someone recently, and she's paying everyone in her business $73,000 a year. So I thought that was kind of interesting, including herself. She's the business owner. So payroll's like 730K. So it's a good business. They're doing well. And she just decided, like, I didn't want to be one of the CEOs where I'm making 400,000 and everyone else is making minimum wage. So I'm just going to break it up, and that's fine. It's cool with me. I liked that. That's not how I would do it, but it aligns with her values. I like that she's reimagining how she can do it. And I think that's one of the things I really hope for people in this program, whether it's how they structure their week, how they do marketing. They can be like, blank slate, I can do this however I want, as long as it gives the business what it needs.
100%. And learning how to say no to stuff. Like, I find, like, with my clients, it's like giving them permission to be like, you can say no, and you can say no nicely. And like, these are what boundaries are, because I'm always like, I mean, and maybe I found out quite late what boundaries were as well. But if you didn't have parents that modeled strong boundaries to you, often you learn that way, way later in life when you start to feel like building resentment in various relationships, that you need boundaries. And so many people don't have strong boundaries in their business.
Well, speaking of boundaries, I wanted to revisit the pricing and the packaging. Greg, you were talking about it earlier, but it feels like there's there's the largest context maybe around lifestyle. What's the kind of lifestyle we want to have? Why are we even doing the business in the first place? To get there, there's business model. There's how do we structure our business, even generally. Is it an online business? Is it a local business? Is it a bricks and mortar? Is it we just rent an office space, or people come to our home? Or there's so many of these structural considerations. And then within business model, there's this question around what are we going to offer anyway? So of course, most people watching this are going to be coaches, holistic practitioners, this type, some service provider. And so it's something that I've noticed for a long time now that most service providers never think about, is the idea of packages, is the idea of putting things together, bundling them in a certain way. It's just usually, do you want another session? How about another session? Would you like another session? How about a session? Do you want another session? And it's just, constantly having to ask people to book again. And then they don't even ask people to book again. And so they're just really relying on I hope people really need help and remember to come back. So packages making things easier. And I'm curious, how do you see the connection between, well, what I heard you say, Greg, in terms of the connection is, if you don't have a package that's a bit higher end, it's hard to even make the business model work, because you're just sort of selling ice cream cones. You're selling, here's a yoga class, but there's no teacher training, I guess. But are there any other connections either of you would add of why people would want to, in designing a week that works, why people would want to take a step back and look at some of this bigger picture of packaging, pricing, business model? Yeah,
I can jump on that to start. So pricing and packaging. Pricing, if it's not high enough, you'll need too many client hours to hit your income goals. Because even if no matter how you're packaging it, it still just breaks down to how much time were you involved in the thing. And at a lower price, typically there's more time that you're involved. Now, if it's more passive income stream, like a course or something, not so much. But in general, if you're mostly a service-based business, your pricing needs to be high enough. Packaging, as you mentioned, is a little bit different, because that comes down to like, how many things did you sell at one time versus do you have to keep reselling? And it's amazing, because I feel like the people who hate marketing and sales the most build a business model that requires the most marketing and sales. They choose a low-priced thing that they have to sell again and again and again. So it's like, if you want to make 10K a month and you sell something for $20 a session, you're going to be marketing and selling that a lot. You're going to need a lot of leads, and you're going to need to keep on people to keep booking. Mark Silver, I think, said something great on this in the Business Model Roundtable. He was like, better to sell something once for 6 months than sell 6 one-month packages. And I was like, that's exactly right. And so when you're able to package stuff up and make one sale for more, you just get to have more time delivering and then potentially looking for people who are a fit for that instead of just continuing to sell to that same person. I think we overestimate how organized people are. Like, let's say I go to a massage therapist. That's a pretty conventional session by session when it makes sense in that context, or a punch pass. But I might love the massage therapist. It might be good for me to get one massage a week. Like, if I actually thought about it and I was sold on it, I'd be like, that would be worth it. That would be a good value. But I'm not going to book a massage a week if it's session to session. I might if we have an intake and we go through a whole audit of my body and she's like, hey, if you give me 6 months, once a week, like, that's going to help all these areas of your life. I might sign up for that. I'm not organized enough to book it once a week because I have other priorities and I'm not always going to take care of myself in that way.
Yeah. And for me, like, experiment with business model for sure. But what I see a lot of people do is experiment with business model when they don't have many people in front of them. So they're like, oh, I'll start a membership because it'll be cheaper. So it'll be easier for people to buy. And they've got like 300 people in front of them. And so they're hustling and they get maybe 20 members in and they're making like a couple of $100 a month, but doing all of this work for it. So I think there's like a myriad of business models that can obviously work. But like, I think logically, when you're trying to nail your service and like where your clients are going to hit obstacles, the more high touch you make that for the clients, the easier it is for you to figure out like, what does it look like when I do it with one? And then if you want to, you know, in the end, create a group program, a membership, or a DIY course, like, you can base it off that work. And I kind of see people trying to run before they can walk because they assume it will be easier to sell if it's cheaper, which is so rarely true.
Yeah, and I want to say one more thing, and this is where I think it's really great to have different perspectives, because Gemma and I made 2 different decisions when we got booked out. Gemma went group program, very established. Like, I would say most of the coaching consulting businesses they're making a lot of money are group program based. Good call. I didn't like group programs as much, right? It wasn't necessarily always my strength, which is why I'm partnering with Gemma on this. I loved either working with people one-on-one or like creating curriculums, like for courses, right? And answering Q&A stuff. So for me, I was just like, my one-on-one is going to be super expensive. It's your choice if you want to pay it or not, but it's going to be an expensive offering. And then I'll have a low end, which is courses. And some of that will just be DIY. And I'll still get that scale from the courses. And so sometimes I think people try to move to scaled offerings way earlier than they need to. It's like, I'm booked out at, $500 a month. It's like, great. It's $2,000 a month now. That'll cover you for another 10 years. Like, you know what I mean? And so, there's many different ways of approaching pricing and packaging, even when you get to the point where you're ready to scale.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a question I'd love to ask you. Let's just say somebody says, well, I can't sign up for your course. The dates don't work. The times don't work. I've got a prejudice against people whose names start with the letter G. It's just never going to work. But they say, in kind of a closing words fashion, why should I even bother designing a week to work? Why, whoever I hire, however I go about it, why should I prioritize designing the unit of a week? Why not a month? Why not just focus on my business model? Why not focus on my niche? Like, of all the levers I could pull, why should I focus on designing a week that works?
For me, it's like partly we can focus on the big rocks separately and you might get progress on them. But ultimately, the progress you see in your business is when you commit to one action done again and again and again. And when we focus on the big rocks, you can be focusing on your niche for like 9 months and find your audience hasn't grown and you haven't done any outward marketing and you haven't made any money. So for me, figuring out a week that works is a commitment to splitting your time and energy across the things that are going to move the needle in your business with a really strong focus on revenue generating tasks, which is the thing that people creatively avoid to go like mess about on Canva or like, design the next logo. So for me, and I really saw this in my business, and I remember like, I remember our first coaching session, Greg, back in 2018, and he was like, you're just going to start posting and you're going to do it every single week, even when no one's listening. And I did it from day one because I'm quite a big rule abider. So when my PT said to me, I won't PT you unless you work out 3 to 5 times a week, I'd never exercised consistently in my whole life. But because I'm such a rule abider, I was like, okay, sure. And ever since that time, 3 years ago, I've exercised 3 to 5 times a week and I'm the strongest I've ever been. So I see it in my fitness. I see it in my business. Success comes from doing the recurring tasks, even when you don't feel like it, as a non-negotiable.
Think that a lot of people who take the program, anyone listening to this, they actually probably already have an area of their life that they figured this out in. Maybe it's parenting. Maybe it's like, you know what, I used to fly by the seat of my pants. I really realized if I don't have systems, we have some structure here with parenting, like, it's just not going to work. It worked for one kid. Maybe then we go to 3 kids and it all breaks down. So then I got really good at it. Or it comes from athletics or fitness. You need to just apply that into your business. So why have a week that works? If you want to have more free time, more balance in your week, not be as reactive, you need a weekly structure, a week that works. If you want to hit your income goals next year or exceed them, you need a week that works. If you want to really do a great job delivering to your clients and showing up consistently without always feeling torn by the business side, then delivery, you need a week that works. And so it's great to set annual goals. It's great to set quarterly goals insofar as they inform your week. The game of business is one week at a time. So you could have a great vision. You could have goals, but it comes down to the actions that you actually take every day and every week. In fact, like, you could really not have your shit together. You could be an alcoholic. You could really just really be struggling in your life. If you do the actions your business needs, you'll still make a ton of money. And so I think, like, it's great to be holistic. But why have a week that works is so that you can get the results that you need in your business.
Yeah, it makes me think of something. I think it was Seth Rogen, the actor, said. He said after all these years in Hollywood, I've realized that one of the most common factors of success is people they kind of persisted. They kept showing up. He said, I've seen so many incredibly talented people who just took it personally, who canceled themselves out of their career, who just quit, who stopped, who got lazy, and the people who just kept going, who just stuck around long enough, ended up getting the opportunities. And he said, what I realized is if you keep showing up, there's a chance you'll succeed. If you don't show up, there's no chance. So at least there's a chance it's going to work if you keep showing up. 2 more reasons I would add also to what you're saying is, when you schedule it, it's real. So anyone wondering about this, one of the exercises I'll do with my clients is I'll have them make a list of what are all things that they need to do every day, every week, every month, once a quarter, just maintenance on their business. And so they do that, and I say, now put how much time does each action take conservatively. Now tally it for how many hours is the daily stuff, the weekly, the monthly. And so they're getting uncomfortable as they do this because they're seeing the numbers add up. I say, great, now take that and put it in your calendar. And they hate me. But as they're doing it, they're getting a real reality check of, oh, this is what it takes. And it just strikes me that really doing this work of designing a week that works, you might realize, I don't have time in my week to do all these things. And then what that reveals to you is there's a business model issue. There's a structural issue. This isn't it's a problem with design. You shouldn't design a week that works then. No, it's the process of designing that week has revealed. It's not that the week is too complex. Your life is too complex. Your business model is too complex. You've designed something that you actually don't have time to sustain. You've built a machine that you can't do the maintenance work on. And so eventually that machine will break down because you don't have enough time every week to oil all the parts. So it seems like this kind of work is just a good reality check, a good revelation on what's the real state of affairs. And the second thing is that when you schedule it, it just becomes real in the way of, oh, I'm going to do it. Because otherwise, I think what we're left with is loose intentions of, I need to do that. Yeah, I need to be You're right. I have to outreach to people. What have I been doing? Absolutely. That's going to be my intention. I'm setting that. I'm visualizing. I'm giving gratitude that it's already, here, and trying to manifest it rather than just putting it in your calendar on this day between these hours. This is what I do. And that's when it actually happens. I don't see it happening unless it's in the calendar. So, yes.
I
So,
want to piggyback on that real quick because I think that's so true. There's a book by Dan and Chip Heath called Switch about behavior change. There's a quote from that book. Any successful change requires a translation of ambiguous goals into concrete behaviors. In short, to make a switch, you need to script the critical moves. It's not enough to know I might try to do YouTube as marketing this year. You really need to know I'm going to make a thumbnail on Monday. I'm going to record the video on Tuesday. Do you know what I mean? Like, you need to break it down to a level that it's actually actionable and doable.
yeah. And the other thing I would say about a course like this, why it's good for entrepreneurs to do this for themselves, is when you hire people, it is desperately important that you can give them these same parameters. Like, here's a week that works for you as my assistant. Here's what I need you to do every week. Here's, and now you may not need to micromanage them, but you're going to have to help them create a structure that's going to work so that the cows get milked, because otherwise, your business is hurting as a result of these things not happening. So it's such a good mindset to get into. The longer I'm in business, it's been 20 years now, roughly. I lost track, about 20, 22 maybe. But the longer I'm around, the more I see it does come down to these simple things, these structural things, because it's easy to go and hide in all the busy work and not actually tend to the most important things, to do everything but the needed thing. So if people want to learn about your course coming up, where do they go?
Weeksthatwork.com. And enrollment closes this Friday, which is the 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And that's enrollment for the beta round that's going to start the first week in January and go for quarter one. So a 3-month program.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, you two. This is wonderful work that you're doing. I hope people will check it out. Check out your work, GemmaGilbert.com and GregFaxon.com. Also, if you want to check out their own personal work. I've worked with both of these folks over the years and had wonderful experiences. Thank you so much. We'll release you back to the worlds that need you, and we'll see you down the road.
Yes,
Thanks, Todd. See you, Gemma.